Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy. We are here to give our spoiler-filled discussion on Black Widow, which is the 2021 superhero film directed by Kate Shortland, the first film in Marvel Cinematic Universe of Phase 4, and the film that I think we're thankful that we all got to see finally, so we don't have to see the trailer any more times at the cinema. At least I'm in that camp. So obviously, we did our spoiler-free review. George, you got an early screener for this thing, so that's out on the channel. So, I mean, why would you click on a spoiler-filled discussion if you haven't seen the film already? This was released for us in the UK yesterday. We've all seen it, and we're all going to give we completely just pull this film apart, scene by scene, every single thing in this film we're going to discuss. So, yeah, go watch the film first, come back to us. But before we dive into this thing, over to George with the socials.
Absolutely, guys. As we said, it's out here in the UK. Rest of the world, America, you have to worry. You can get it at cinemas tomorrow, or you can do the Disney premiere thing tomorrow too. But go to the cinema, please. It's much better to watch it at cinema than at home. But if you have seen it, comment along with this tonight. You know, anything we're going to go through, so Chris said, most of the film. I want to hear your thoughts on the good, the bad, the ugly. And obviously, you know, I want to keep hyping it. There's a lot of Marvel things happening right now. There's a lot of Marvel shows. They dropped a trailer for What If tonight, which I've not seen yet, which I'm hearing really good stuff about. So, obviously, if you're into Marvel, this is the place to be. So hit that subscribe button. If you're new to the channel, you want to find out more about our videos, other stuff coming up. There's a hell of a lot of films, with it being summer blockbuster season. So you want to get us on our social medias, which is Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy, letterboxd.com/Cinema Savvy, and we have a link to our TeePublic store in that description below. But as I said, this is the first of 4 Marvel films coming out this year. Let that sink in. Obviously, I think there's one everyone's looking more forwards to. That's going to be December the 17th, and it's got certain Spider-Man returning, quotation marks. So that's the one I'm far more excited about heading into this. But before we really get into this, I want to ask both of you guys, because obviously I saw it earlier, didn't plan on seeing it early, and didn't actually like watching it early because the state of that screen, which I'll get into later. But what were your thoughts heading into this film? Like gap-wise, I know it's not really a gap now, we've got the TV shows, but where were you heading into Black Widow? Did you care? That's probably the first question.
I guess I'll go first. Zero hype at all. I don't think I've had less hype for a Marvel movie, which is scary to say. I think it's a combination of things that kind of led to that being little hype for this film. For starters, and I know you mentioned it in the spoiler-free one, but I want to say it again here. This film came like 4 or 5 years too late. Absolutely. This film should have been phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, not phase 4. And especially given the events from previous films, this is a spoilers discussion, so I'll just go and say it. Her dying in Endgame, like, this should have come before then. I know they wanted to kind of go back and show her past and everything like that, but this is going to sound really horrible, but I don't really care for a character that's being killed, and there's not much more you can add to that. And especially with COVID and all the delays that this film had, it got to the stage where, like you guys were saying, you'd watch this trailer in the cinema and you'd be like, Jesus, I feel like I don't even care what the film actually has anymore inside of it. Like it should have been released probably last year at some point, whether that be on their online service and then we could have seen it in cinemas now, or whether they actually released it when the cinemas were open. But either way you look at it, this film came too late in almost every respect, and it just led to there being no hype for me at all.
Yeah, I mean, I completely echo everything Tate said. So, yeah, the amount of times that I saw this trailer and trailer 2, trailer 3, and all variations of the different trailers, it did feel like I'd seen the film without even seeing the film, which is always the case when I see a trailer too many times. And the delays didn't help. I know they had to do what they wanted to do. And, you know, it's clearly Disney were banking on this film and knew that it was going to make major money. So they were holding out for the cinema release as opposed to pretty much all their other films before this point, where they just put it on Disney Plus with a premium attached to it. But yeah, I think it's the fact narratively, we've seen the character die. She kind of served all the purpose that she needed to as her role. And if they wanted to do a solo film, I'd go so far as to say it's 10 years too late, you know, like bring it out either before Avengers or at least after Avengers. You know, maybe Avengers and Iron Man 2 could be your introduction and then go into a solo film. But I think narratively as well, the time that this is set in between Civil War and Infinity War, I don't think that's a particular interesting period for the character. And I think that's going to probably be one of my biggest negatives about the film, that in my opinion, the most interesting stuff with the character is the stuff that you get sort of pre-credits and credit sequence. And then after that, it's just, I don't really care. And also, this might just be sort of like my bias as well, but I've never been a big fan of Black Widow as a character in the MCU. I just think that she's pretty one note, pretty bland. And, when you have got a series where you have, robot suits and super soldiers and literal gods, you've got someone who just kind of is good at fighting, but just has pistols. I'd say the same with Hawkeye as well. It's just that I don't have that same connection to the character, maybe, and that kind of bleeds over into this one. I am interested, though, if this had have, say, come out in between Civil War and Infinity War, if my opinion on this film would have changed. I think the fact that we have had all these massive, larger-than-life films with Infinity War, with Endgame especially, that this feels like a kind of step back. Even the TV shows that are pushing the MCU into a weird, wonderful new direction with loads of intrigue and all this mysticism around it, to go back to a fairly below average sort of spy thriller for me, I don't know, just didn't really hit me the way I thought it would. But then again, I didn't go into it with massive hype anyway.
Yeah, I think a really big thing for me, you mentioned the TV shows, that's been it for me, that, this would have been the first thing of Phase 4, let alone first film. This would have been before the TV shows were going to air last year. This was going to be the first one from all of it. I personally, to bring up, ending on Spider-Man was a bad note for the Infinity Saga. Now all the merch is out. It wasn't out when we were doing the Infinity Saga retrospective, but there's now Lego sets, there's now Marvel Legends figures. The Infinity Saga is now a definitive franchise line for Iron Man through to Spider-Man Far From Home. And it goes back to the whole Sony thing. Was Spider-Man really set there? Because it's set a year after that film anyway. But this opening Phase 4, I'm going to be really polite because I don't mind the film. I think it's very average, but I'm very glad we've had the TV shows first. I'm glad we've had most of Loki. I'm glad we've had Falcon and Winter Soldier, and we've already had WandaVision, because if this opened Phase 4, I'd have been like, what was the point? In the same way that Spider-Man kind of closed Phase 3, didn't make any sense. It wasn't really an epilogue. But it was like, there was no point to that. But I'm happy we're now in a phase where I can look at it thinking, okay, very much even all my friends that we watch the Marvel films together, they're the same thing. The trailer's overdone it. I think it's overdone for a lot of people. I mean, you got to think, when was this? The trailers would have first come out in what? Was it end of 2019? Maybe that first trailer came out for this, or start of 2020. And it's just been on loop for a year. And I don't think it helps when you've had so many release date changes. I think this one, look at Fast 9, right? They bumped it to straight away. They did a 1 year delay. Then they put it forward an extra 2 months. That was Fast and Furious done. Whereas this one was one that every 2 months later, every 2 months later, every 2 months later. I think once you get so many delays, you just don't care, but it just doesn't feel like, why is it that big a deal that they just want it out, but they clearly can't afford to put it out right now. Whereas the films that have just chucked a release date in the future and stuck to it, Fast and Furious, again, they put off marketing for a year. Whereas this film kept getting more trailers and more footage in this last year. And I don't think any of it's helped this film at all. And it's going back to what you guys said. It's the time when she's dead. We saw her definitively dying. Chris, going back to what you said, she's not a superhero. They can't have another Marvel, they're not actually dead. This is a definitive mortal who is dead in Endgame. And obviously we'll get to the post-credit sequence, which I actually liked, but it's one of those where you go into this film knowing the stakes. Oh, it's set between before Infinity War. We know she's on the run, and she'll carry on being on the run. It's even thinner than knowing she dies in Endgame. So it's just one of them where it's a struggle. And I'm gonna sort of speak about the sort of Marvel really quickly. That this is just one of their pathetic. We actually really wanted to give her a solo film for years. We just didn't. So, no, you waited for DC to have a massive hit, and then Captain Marvel we knew they were working on, which is fine. But the Black Widow should have had a film out in 2011. I get delaying Captain Marvel for the release date they wanted it for pre Endgame, but this one there was no excuse. They just didn't want to pull the trigger, and I think this is this kind of sort of sorry Scarlett Johansson. I know that she's signing off. This is the last one. She's got a producer credit as well, but it feels she said this week in interviews that this is done and dusted. This is my last thing doing Black Widow. And that's all there is to it. And when you hear stuff like that, again, we know she's already dead, so it's kind of pointless. And I want to kind of add to all that stuff. I think if the decision had been made today, this would have been a TV series anyway. Just like Hawkeye is going to be a show. I think it would have been
better as a TV series as well, definitely. Yeah.
I don't think this warranted. I mean, it was great seeing it on a big screen, but the whole film wasn't a must-see IMAX extravaganza like what Spider-Man will be, like what Eternals looks like it's going to be. This was like, it's a Marvel film. You need to see it at the cinema, but I know it sounds very ironic because I hate the screener, but equally, this is a 8-episode show, I think would have been far more interesting than a 2-hour film.
Do you know what's really interesting? This is a little bit of behind the scenes thing for people, but we always have like a plan that we have on the side of our screen that we can always see, and you've pretty much got there an 8-episode show written out with every single plot point of what you'd have in every single episode going all the way down there, which is crazy, which I guess we're going to go into talking about now. We've written down The Americans here. The Americans being a TV show based around a Russian family who are kind of blending into American society, but they're actually spies living out their lives and trying to gain information during the Cold War times. I'm currently watching through it, and I thought it'd be kind of quite cool just with going in with Black Widow as well to kind of try and get as much of the show watched as possible, because I thought, okay, it would be very similar if they're going for that family angle. It's not done to the same kind of... I know it's a film, and I know they have a limited amount of time, but this is a very much flash in the pan, quick kind of opening 5, maybe even 10 minutes, where they kind of show that they were kind of spies living in America and then they escape. And I really wish they delved into that a little bit more. And maybe they could have done that with a TV series, but it was kind of pushed towards just being like the opening of the film instead.
Yeah, this was the most interesting stuff in the film for me. And I think the area of the film that was sort of the most fertile for character development and character growth for Natasha's character and the rest of the family. I haven't seen that TV show, so I can't comment on that, specifically about the show or its parallels or whatnot. But I think this came down to sort of like behind the scenes as well. And I know that Scarlett Johansson was in talk with Kevin Feige when they were trying to sort of craft sort of like where in the narrative timeline they wanted to set the film. So there were originally talks that it was going to be a complete prequel and show her, like in the Red Room and flashes that we'd got in Age of Ultron and everything like that going way, way into her past. And they eventually obviously decided against that, and they wanted to ground it around the same time. And they thought there's a decent chunk of time in between Civil War and Infinity War where you can explore a character when she's out on her own after she hasn't got the Avengers to turn to and she's sort of out on her own. So I can understand that decision. But to me, the most interesting stuff was that intro, and I wanted to see more of that. And unfortunately, you get it in this kind of frenetic sort of credit sequence played to a Nirvana song. And even before that, I thought that that's where you get the real emotion. There's the most intrigue with it. And part of me kind of wishes that, I mean, you've got to have a Black Widow film with Scarlett Johansson in, right? Like, you have to. But I kind of wish it had been a prequel. It felt very much like the Man of Steel or Rogue One syndrome for me on this one, that you start off and you want to see this character develop and become the character that you know, and then it's like 20 years later or however many years later, and you jump and you skip that huge span of time where that's where your character is developing and growing and becoming the character that you want. So skipping to that, I don't know. I understand why they had to do it, because if they split this film into 3 and you say had like child Natasha, sort of adolescent Natasha, and then had Scarlett Johansson at the end, and you split it into like a 3-act thing covering her life, I don't think that would have worked either. But I don't know. I wanted to see more of what the film was setting up at the beginning, and then after that, it just kind of resorted to middle of the road sort of like action Marvel film for me. And I thought that that's where, if you wanted like a more R-rated or more hard-hitting thing about child soldiers and everything like that, which is like a harrowing topic in itself, this was the film to do it. And I think that would have pushed Marvel into a new direction. But on the flip side, it wouldn't have been a palatable, marketable thing, 12A that kids can go and see. And so yeah, it is what it is. It's part of the Marvel machine, isn't it, essentially?
We do get. I want to add though, one of the most. I thought this was the most brutal Marvel death I've seen so far. The knife with Florence Pugh at the start, like she stabs someone and like rips out. And in the cinema screen yesterday, there was like a couple of like audible noises of people, and I was like, I don't think Marvel's had like a human death in that sense. Not clicking fingers and that, but yeah,
you get away with it though because you don't see the blood or anything,
well,
do you?
Thing,
like there'd be a lot of it.
You get
doesn't she twist the knife as well?
Yeah, exactly.
Like and bowels a kind of thing. It looks like
it's
pretty
savage. But we'll get to that in a little bit of Yelena. But no, I'm with you. And I think as well that one of the problems I have, and this jumps ahead, I love the whole family dynamic. I love all 4 members as well, and them together in their scenes was the best thing in this. And the scene at the start on the rewatch works so much better because there was little things you noticed more and more. But when we jump to the future, even aside from Natasha growing up, we don't know what happened with Red Guardian still, why he's in prison. We don't know the backstabbing. They think Melina's dead as well. We don't know why or how or what's to be. But even though he's in the gulag, he still knows everything that happened with her. And obviously, we know it's not hard. Florence Pugh went through the same thing, and she just carried on being an agent, so that's not too big a deal. But you feel like you've missed out important details, and it's not like, oh, we'll discover it across the film. You don't even get that. It's just like, this was said, and that was it. We don't really find out more, and it leaves you wanting more, certainly in that 90s period. And I think that's more down to, I don't know if it's the writing or something, but who knows? Maybe there's a plan for a young, I almost said Vinnie Jones then, for a young Ray Winston, David Harbour series one day in the future. Who knows? But I think the time jump didn't help anyone that wasn't Scarlett Johansson. Because also we know what happened with her. We know she defected to S.H.I.E.L.D. We know she was with Clint Barton in Budapest, and we know something went down, and they hid for days because that's all they ever said. And I'm glad they showed bits of it. I'll give it that. But I'm glad also we didn't get Hawkeye in it, because I think that'd have been a bit too distracting. And I think you had enough info. But jumping ahead from that, let's talk the credit sequence, because I didn't mind the Nirvana song. I know we spoke about this before we hit record. I have heard it used in Pan, and that is enough for it to ever be used for me. And there is no bar set after listening to it in Pan. I think it worked for the actual credits. I loved the credits, the actual stylization of them. I love that kind of, even in stuff like Godzilla versus Kong, when you get like retracted lines and all that kind of stuff. I love a good spy opening credit scene that's not just James Bond. And I was kind of saying before, so I think I'm trying to think of opening title sequences. And Chris, you mentioned Hulk. I'm really struggling to think of any others in the MCU. I'm sure there is. There's some great ones in the technically not MCU till December 17th in Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3. But aside from them, I really liked that. But again, it's not something we're used to seeing, which I think helped do the time jump.
I didn't like it. It felt really out of place for me. And maybe that's because I'm not used to seeing these kind of credit sequences going into Marvel films, and I know that I'm going to a cinema to kind of escape and kind of detach myself, but being told that I'm watching a film instead of watching a character and watching a series of events is very different to actually experiencing the series of events. And I think Marvel has done a very good job so far with their end title sequences. And as I think this would have worked it couldn't have worked as an end title sequence because it shows a bit of story and it kind of carries it on. But I don't know if it was a combination of the music or whether it was what was kind of going on with it and having the names flash up on the screen and stuff like that. It completely detached me from the film from the very start, especially after a good start and a good actual action sequence at the start with the plane escape and everything like that. I was really invested, and then it kind of started to drop off in quality after that.
See, I'm going to meet in the middle here because I love a good title sequence, and I think more films need a title sequence. It seems to be a thing that was always part of like older films, and it kind of like eases you into it. And I think it's very welcome in superhero films as well. Batman '89, Superman the movie, the Holy Trinity of Spider-Man films. It's almost like an overture that kind of like takes you into the film and gets you like into the vibe of it. So I don't have a problem with there being a title sequence. My problem is that all of the character development happens in this quick cut montage. And I think that, like the 2008 Incredible Hulk film is probably the best comparison. I mean, I'm trying to think of another one now. I can't really think of, like we mentioned, like Guardians of the Galaxy as well. But I think it's closer to Hulk in that Incredible Hulk one, that functions as kind of like an origin story as well as being the title sequence. You see the experiment going wrong with Banner and the gamma radiation and them pursuing him, and then that takes you into the opening of your film. The problem that I had with it was the overly moody, even more moodier than Nirvana themselves, which I didn't even think was possible, cover of Smells Like Teen Spirit. It just felt like, who's listening to Spotify at that moment, what can fit, let's throw it in the editing and get it going. Now, I am a sucker for sort of like moody cover versions of songs. It seems to be a trend at the moment. Usually in video game trailers, I've found if you've got like a cinematic trailer, they'll throw one in there. I just thought, oh, Nirvana again. Like it felt like I was watching a Zack Snyder film. It felt like Zack Snyder had directed that opening sequence. And not just that, but music sort of plays a big part in this. We'll talk about the actual score later, which I did think was massively underwhelming. But what's his name? Don McLean, I want to say. Don McLean's American Pie is a huge part of character development in this film. and gets a payoff, which is maddening. Now, I had a problem with this, and if I'm not into a film, I tend to sort of like pick apart little minute things that don't bother anyone, but I just kind of zero in on. They pop that tape in at the beginning, and you get kind of like another musical montage of the family listening to this song. And the song kicks in at the chorus as they put the tape in. I'm like, who does that? Like, rewind the tape for God's sake and listen to it from the beginning. Or like, why would you stop that song right before the chorus is about to kick in? I don't understand it. But that was weird. That was kind of like a moment that came up later as well, that they have this big argument. We'll talk about it later. And it's all settled by singing American Pie by Don McLean. Like, does that bring family together?
Chris,
I don't know.
Pie fixes everything.
And apparently it is in this one. All this bad blood, decades of hate and loathing, and him just sort of like signing these children up to be, child soldiers, and forced mutilation and sterilization. And they put all their differences behind when they start singing American Pie. So I don't know. We'll talk about that later, though, because that's much later in the film. But still, I was bothered by that.
I told Jesse I didn't even know it was a real song. I literally,
you did.
I heard this radio. I was like, oh my word, we're getting Weird Al Yankovic Galaxy, this Star Wars song. And I was really excited. And I was like, oh my god! I was like, this was a real song.
Oh my god!
I thought this was legitimate because I was ready to pounce because I was like, hold on. I was like, that song came out in '99, not '95. But I learn something new every day. Again, I've always said music is not my forte. I don't pretend to name the music industry, so. You can only imagine the displeasure going from what you think is a Star Wars sing-along to actually something completely different.
I don't know how you've gone your whole life without hearing the original song.
I've never heard it. And this is what's mad. I've never heard it. Because, there are many songs I have heard that I don't know the name of. And when someone tells the name, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I've heard that like beat or that rhythm before. But this I've only ever known as Weird Al Yankovic. Is it The Saga Begins? I can't remember. It's a great song, though. The Star Wars one.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was really weird for me. It's like you discover something new every day.
I think this could be a new series on the channel. Like, we need to make George sit down and listen to all these songs and get his review and reaction on them.
The first one, Purple Rain, is absolutely still the first one.
Yeah.
To be fair, I'm very similar. I'm very simple with music, and like my sister take the piss because I listen to a song. They're like, "So what film have you watched recently? It's had this song in." That's the only way I'm going to find out these songs is by watching films of the minute.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess we move on to kind of being on the run from Civil War. So we do get Mr. Thunderbolt Ross making a cameo towards the start of it, which I quite like. Has he appeared in more films now than Hawkeye? That's a good question.
No, I think Hawkeye's probably still got them.
Four films now. Yeah, Hawkeye. Oh no. The equal. Hold on. Thor.
Hawkeye's in Thor. Yeah, Avengers.
Thor, Avengers 2, Avengers 4. He's not. He's got no. Oh, is he? No, he didn't have a cameo in any of the other shows, did he? Not
at the moment. No.
Thunderbolt's got what? Hulk, Civil War, Infinity War. Oh no, Endgame. He was at the funeral. Of course he was. Mm-hmm. And Black Widow.
He's been in more films than
Hawkeye.
Wow. Maybe he'll be in the Hawkeye show as well to balance it out further.
Oh, dear God. But it was just kind of not really a long sequence or anything. That just kind of shows that he's tracking him down, pinpoints what time period we're in, because we know that she's on the run and everything like that. And this is something that I'm a little bit slightly confused by. And this kind of jumps around towards the ending and also jumps towards kind of Infinity War and stuff like that. When I thought she went on the run, I thought she went on the run with Captain America. And I was really confused because at the airport scene, kind of, I know they all scatter and they all do their own thing and some people get captured. But I'm wondering how she managed to meet back up with Captain America after kind of this film is over. And it's all confusing in that kind of sense of trying to figure it out. The only thing that I could figure out was, oh, she's got the blonde hair at the end. That means that it must be Infinity War next. And that's really it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many years it was in between Civil War and Infinity War. Like, if it was a good few years, then it's just reasonable to assume that she met up with Steve too. Yeah. Maybe they've left room for a Black Widow too, where we get those two in it together. God forbid, because I don't want to see him come back as Captain America either. Like, just let them stay dead and let their stories be told. I didn't really have a problem with that. I think that if you'd have introduced Steve at the end, then that's just bringing the actor back into the fray again, which I think lessens the impact of his finale and Endgame. And I think because this is a Black Widow solo film, it kind of needed to begin and end with just her. And it did feel very much like a send off, a final farewell to Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. The On the Run from Civil War, though, I guess we need to talk about our kind of villain for this film with Taskmaster, because she's kind of on the run with that. I was intrigued by the trailers. You've kind of got this sort of like biker helmet, skull-faced assassin. I didn't know anything about Taskmaster at the time. I ain't gonna lie to you. Like I know some characters from Marvel, but I didn't know Taskmaster. And then I think it was Jeremy Johns' review on this thing, and I think he compared it brilliantly. And I think that's, if I went into this not knowing this, I think I would have had an even bigger problem with the villain. But he said that the character is mostly mute. They kind of Deadpool 2009 X-Men Origins the character of Taskmaster. And after watching some like animated shows with Taskmaster, and I didn't realize he was in the Spider-Man PS4 game as well as like a hidden boss. So much personality, so much charisma. Let me just bring up the character's name here. Tony Masters in the comic books. I mean, Marvel just kind of do their own thing with this character here. I love the look of the character. I love the physicality of the character. And I mean, this is the trait from the character in the comic books, but how they can sort of scan and perceive and match someone's, replicate all of their movements, essentially. So they're like the prime fighting force and tactician. Absolutely love that. But they kind of bastardized the character a little bit. And I think that, Marvel's always had a villain problem. I think that's fair to say. They have had some strong ones with Loki in the early days. Thanos is easily one of the best, and hopefully we get some good villains later on as well. Having a mute villain, it's not interesting to watch. They can be imposing, they can be intimidating, but I think they lost a lot by not having a voice and not having a personality from the character. It's basically just like a mad dog villain, and jumping to the end, we get the revelation of there's kind of a twist with the character as to how they bring it into the MCU. But I didn't think that was as interesting as the character actually is from the comic books and that we've seen in other versions of the media. So I don't know. I was really let down by Taskmaster. And then on top of Taskmaster, you've just kind of got Ray Winston, who's great and is an absolute national treasure. And it's brilliant to see him try and do a Russian accent, as many actors in this film try to do a Russian accent to moderate degrees of success. But I mean, he was entertaining, but he's not going to be in the pantheon of best Marvel villains, not by a country mile. He's just kind of the businessman suit character that we see so many times, and we've seen so many times in Marvel stuff, especially WandaVision, like the army general guy at the end. I was just let down by like the whole villain thing. And I think that added to my sort of disinterest with this film. I didn't really care about the main antagonists towards the end.
I'm kind of with you with some of it. I don't like Taskmaster when I've seen it in the cartoons. I know Clancy Brown voiced him. Mm-hmm. I hated him in the Spider-Man game. It reminded me of Deathstroke on Arkham. That's why I just get pissed off and it'd pop up because that's a stupid side mission. But I don't think Taskmaster like that could ever work. Not necessarily in Marvel, but certainly in a Black Widow film. I think that's a very tough character to put on a screen in live action. So that you get certain characters that work better in comics and animation form are better than live action. And I think Taskmaster's one, just the concept of you can mimic everyone's too hard to do. I didn't mind the whole silent stuff. For people at home that didn't clock it, I'm going to say Olga Kurylenko is on the opening credits, I think is the third name. I think you get Scarlett Johansson, Florence Pugh, and I'm sure it's then Olga Kurylenko. And that was a massive spoiler. I mean, obviously, we might have a Taskmaster chat now. Anyone's deluded that thought this was probably going to be Hawkeye. I know it was smart, we had a bow and arrow in the trailer, and I got that, but logically that could never have ever happened. I think the people that knew it would know that it wasn't always going to be Hawkeye, but the whole science of I thought at least kept it intriguing and an enigma. Now, I'm a bit in a neutral zone because I said to you guys for I love I've known who this is for 2 years, via other ways, not spoilers online and stuff like that, but. And that's why it's been really I've not told anyone, so I'm very proud of that. I followed an NDA, but it's so not underwhelming. It's just a bit odd. The character that I understand what they're doing with it, and I do like when he gets into it. The haunting of the nightmares. This is what you create, all that kind of stuff. But it just falls under henchman at the end of it. Like Taskmaster is just someone that gets sent out to do Ray Winston's bidding. I don't mind that, and I think again that was all over the trailers. You wouldn't have known it if you hadn't seen the trailers, but I think in the trailer, like Ray Winston's talking to it, sending it out, and I didn't mind it. I like the action scenes of Taskmaster, but I don't think it's a character that personally I've ever cared for. So not seeing it on screen, it just wasn't a big deal. And also, again, I already knew who it was, so I'm curious of people that didn't have a single clue in the world. And also for people who don't know who Olga Kurylenko is, probably would have also been able to maybe not had it spoiled for them.
Yeah, I'll say that I was underwhelmed by Taskmaster in this film. And what I knew about Taskmaster going into it was that Taskmaster could copy any move. And I was expecting to see some really cool hand-to-hand kind of fight scenes and stuff like that. Looking to see different styles of fighting as well. Possibly like one of the characters trying to change their fighting style, knowing that or not knowing that anything's working. Go, okay, I need to change a plan here. I need to change how I fight. And it not working or something like that. Just different fight scenes and stuff like that, especially because they've got Shang-Chi coming through this year as well, which is going to have like martial arts kind of throwing into the mix and stuff like that. I thought this would be a quite nice gateway kind of through into kind of, oh, you could see more of different fighting styles within the MCU. And this isn't a critique of Taskmaster themselves, but this is more a critique of the kind of the filming and the editing. I thought the fight scenes were not very well shot in a lot of cases. A lot of the hand-to-hand fight scenes were really not well done, especially in an age, and I know it's Marvel films, but in an age where we've got films like John Wick, where we've got films like The Raid, I've heard that Nobody is meant to be fantastic as well for that. You've got to evolve with the times of how your fight scenes are shot and how they're done. This felt like Bourne Supremacy. I didn't say Bourne Identity because Bourne Supremacy is more shaky cam. And this felt like a lot of shaky cam, not really seeing any of the punches landing and stuff like that. I know that they did the stunts themselves on set and they did have fight choreography and stuff like that, but that is down to the filmmaking then, if it wasn't actually put onto the film. I think that weakens the character of Taskmaster. If you can't watch the fight scenes properly, how are you meant to see that Taskmaster copies all the moves in every single circumstance? Otherwise, Taskmaster just does become another henchman character. And I think that really lessens that character just from that filmmaking.
I know one of like the big critiques that we're going to have in this film, we'll probably talk about it more towards the end, but is the CGI in this film. I know, George, from your screener, you had like a very different sort of perception with the CGI in this film, maybe even worse than some of the scenes that we saw. But this scene in particular where she first fights Taskmaster, where I didn't think they could top Doctor Strange's car crash in terms of sheer over-the-toppedness. They top it in this film, and they do it so many times. And I'm going to compare this film in many ways to Fast 9, not just because family is at the root of the film, but in terms of some of the action in this film and the completely ridiculous shit that they're surviving. Now, I get that it's a comic book. You know, it's heightened. Even Hawkeye and Black Widow, of course, they're sort of look like the more... Well, they are human characters, essentially. They're just proficient in fighting, but they can still do some, you know, crazy, outlandish stuff. But there's stuff in this, and this is a trope. And I've been kind of aware of this trope for ages with films, but it came more evident with this film. You can have someone in the most, like, crazy car crash ever, and the way that you show that they're kind of injured, but not really, a little bit of blood around the mouth, a little bit of blood, scratch over the eye, and that's it. And this happens so many times in this film. There's a moment where... you've got Taskmaster pursuing them down to the subway, I think it was, wasn't it, or something like that, and their car goes off the road and it spins out of control and careers down this staircase, and they just get out and they're fine. And that works for Fast 9 because we've had that build over all the years to the point where it is like, fuck it, why not? Like, this is crazy, and they are very self-aware in Fast 9 of that fact, and that's why I can kind of become okay with it. But with the action, with something like this, you needed like a Russo brothers directing this film, because Taskmaster as a character feels kind of like Winter Soldier in many ways, you know, the silent assassin being sent out on all these secret covert missions. But Winter Soldier works better because you have the character of Bucky and the history with Captain America to back it up. So you are seeing this character who we knew from the first film, you know, go completely off the deep end and become this villain and this really tragic anti-hero character. You don't get any of that with Taskmaster. You're cramming all of that into one film, and mostly silent antagonist, with this story of she was, you know, the child of the main villain who Black Widow, it was like collateral damage, but she isn't really dead. And it just didn't work for me, and you don't have the same kind of stakes. And carrying over into that with the Russo brothers comparison is the action. You look at the action in Winter Soldier, especially on the highway, and it's this very sort of gritty, more realistic fight scenes that we hadn't really seen in Marvel at that point, and I'd even argue since that point as well outside of the MCU. And you needed something like that for Black Widow. And me and you, Tate, were talking about this before we went live, that this is where you needed that same kind of backdrop as a Winter Soldier, the kind of 70s spy thriller kind of feel to it. And I don't feel like they achieved that with this one. Winter Soldier's perfect and why it's my favorite in the MCU, which we've already discussed on the review for Winter Soldier, but it toes the line of being a modern superhero blockbuster film and also completely at home as being a homage to those 70s films, those 70s spy films. And you needed something like that with this one, I think. And I don't think they hit that point. I never got like any kind of stylistic choices directorially or anything like that. It just felt so run-of-the-mill average blockbuster, kind of like a Fast 9 kind of vibe to it. And I think they lost out on a lot. You look at the history of this film when it was owned by Lionsgate. I was doing a bit of reading. Metal Gear Solid's own David Hayter, who does the voice of Solid Snake in the film, he's also screenwriter and everything. He was going to direct and write the film. The rights eventually went back to Marvel, and it's funny, there's like a massive time jump. It says, like they were talking about a solo film right around the time of Iron Man 2. And then it just jumps and it's like, and then they started pre-production in 2017. There's like a massive jump, but I don't know. I feel like you needed a director with a bit more vision, someone who was going to bring something, stylistically new to the table. And I actually haven't seen anything Kate Shortland's done. She's just done a few films before this. I think this is her first sort of like big blockbuster film she's done. I think she's done sort of like a lot of smaller drama films before this point, but I don't know, that kind of carries over into the action as well. And the digital doubles as well were terrible in the hand-to-hand fight scenes. Show me like a John Wick, as you mentioned, like the really balletic dance-like fight sequences, showcase that and like the talent of what people can do. When you just like change it on a dime and you've got like CGI video game characters for a quick few seconds, it just sticks out like a sore thumb. And that was some of my least favorite stuff in the film, I think.
And I think that's been a problem with Black Widow as a character, is that in most films, her digital double has always been even more obvious than the other ones. I don't know if it's because she's not
difficult to do humans.
Yeah, and this is it. And she's not going to fly and all this stuff. But in this film, more than any of the others, it was more noticeable. Think of an action scene, running across the rooftops. Okay, we can see Scarlett sliding down. Going across the bridge thing, CGI. Okay, good action scene. Yeah, that's her on the bridge. Definitely not her swinging and catching David Harbour's hand, is it? It's so noticeable. The bloody whole flying at the end as well. The Spider-Man 3 scenes were just ridiculous. And that's where
Spider-Man 3 as well. Yeah.
you've got a mortal character who is a super, who is an Avenger, but you've given them a sort of a stakes, a big scene, and all this stuff where their character shouldn't be. That should be something Captain America does take down. I'm not taking away from Black Widow; she's an interesting character, but I felt like I liked the stakes. It was very a personal film, right? I know this is kind of a bit of an overall, but when you've got the whole family stuff, you've got a personal connection to the villain in Dreykov, to the henchman Taskmaster. But then it's elongated and a fucking giant spaceship at the end to have a humongous set piece. This film didn't need it. That could have been a castle anywhere in the world. When they were the opening scenes, right, when she was on the run, that felt like I was about to watch Insomnia when she's on the water or something between mountains, like a location and stuff like that. Oh, sorry.
You're back.
So yeah, I was talking about the Insomnia thing. Like, I thought, we're going to get like a low stakes film, like all set in the mountains, or because this isn't the kind of character that can, again, Captain America bring down a humongous satellite dish and all that, fly to space like Fast 9. But they started putting all those big superhero tropes, and I think that really takes it away from the film, because the strongest thing in this film is all of the family characters and all the scenes of them together sitting at the table. We'll get to that. All them personally have so much individually to give. And I kind of said this, I can't remember if I said in the video on Twitter, but I took a 2-hour film with the 4 of them sat on a table over what we had with silly over the top action set pieces, because it takes you so far out of the film. It's really disappointing. And for a farewell to a character that's been around for sort of 10 plus years as well, I don't think it's fitting. I know this is more of a passing the torch film, which is probably the best way to bring Yelena, but personally, I see this more as a Florence Pugh film than I do Scarlett Johansson. I think she's the best thing in this film by a complete country mile. And we know she's obviously from the credit scene going to be in Hawkeye, which is now confirmed as well. So it's a weird one because I think things were missing. Like some things worked so well, but for everything that worked well, there was probably 2 things that didn't, and it evened out to a flat average. And I think its strengths were in its character writing, not the writing of the set pieces and the action stuff.
I'll agree with you. The family itself were the strongest parts of the film, and I think that lends itself to the fact that the stakes in this film should be low. Like, they shouldn't be going, oh, high stakes, like the world's going to end, because the world definitely isn't going to end. You know that like Black Widow's going to survive the film because she's alive for the next film, like canonically. It's like, I feel like the family stuff grounded that and kind of made it feel more personal and made it feel more like an intimate film. I do think Florence Pugh, with that whole passing the torch thing, I think she'll do a great job in the future as that character. She's been on an absolute roll recently with all of her roles. Me and Chris actually had a very interesting conversation beforehand about her accent. I do think her accent does slip a few times in the film. And I don't know, as an international assassin, whether she's a Black Widow or not, I think that as a character, they should have just kind of kept it as any old accent. I mean, she's English. Give her an English accent. Like, because she's a super spy that goes all over the world and does stuff. Like, Scarlett Johansson doesn't show off her kind of Russian accent all the time because she's obviously operating in America. It's an interesting kind of choice that they went for that in the end. I'm not sure whether it paid off or not. It made sense with the other 2 characters in the family to have the Russian accents because they stayed in Russia and they kind of continued to do the Russian things. But I feel like with a family kind of run film, I feel like they could have gone in a lot harder once again on that Taskmaster kind of reveal of being like Ray Winston's daughter and stuff like that. I was half expecting them to show a bit more of Budapest there and Ray Winston turn around and go, so what really did happen in Budapest, and kind of bring back those memories and show actually she did a lot more than just kind of set off a few bombs when she saw the child in the room. She kind of planted her in there, or just something that made her completely 100% guilty and the bad person, just that she could get out the program. I wanted to see more of that. I wanted to see more of kind of the darker side to her. I know that she tried to kill a kid and didn't kill the kid, but I would have wanted to have like seen more of her before she turned good, see more of that kind of dark side that she's always having to play off against. Because we do hear some things in the MCU. I can't remember which film it is, but people make mention of stuff that she'd done in the past and her having a history and it not being the nicest. We never get to see any of that as a character. And we do get to see a little bit in Florence Pugh's character because she's kind of going through that process of not defecting, but she's going from that process of kind of transitioning towards possibly a better side. But I wanted to see more from the lead character. I wanted to see more from the reason why people go to see this film, Black Widow, and we didn't get that in the end, which was really disappointing for me.
We can't have morally grey characters in the MCU. Tate, what are you talking about? We can't have complex characters.
She's dead, so we can make her as morally grey and complex as possible.
Well, again, Tate, you would have got those morally grey scenes if they'd have, based the film on the actual credit sequence of this film. You would have got all of that in spades and everything, but, we can't have that. We've got to have a family-friendly film. I get it. The accent, just going back to the accent thing, it's always been something that I've had a problem with, including Scarlett Johansson as the character as well. So all the way back in Iron Man 2, Natasha Romanoff, there's a clue in the name right there. And I was really bothered by the fact that she was just American. I actually do give credit to, what's his name? Director of the first Avengers film. Help me out here. Joss Whedon, that he did at least have her speak Russian and brought in more of those Russian elements to the character. And it felt like, okay, your heart's in the right place. You're trying to do something there and go into that history with the character. So I did actually appreciate that. Accents has never been a thing that have been very consistent with the MCU. Looking at Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda as well, that kind of comes and goes all the time, which, I think they've even made reference to in WandaVision itself. Florence Pugh as Yelena. I liked her emotional scenes, and I thought, she did turn in a good performance, but my God, that accent just kept coming in and out, like in between sentences. It was so distracting to me. So I appreciate them for trying, but I just didn't think she was consistent enough with the accent personally. But I agree, like the family stuff in the film, is the best stuff. Jumping ahead, but where you do have where they're sitting around like the table and you have that home sequence. I remember when like the bad guys show up essentially, and we go into another action scene. I was like, oh no, do we have to get on with the plot? Like I was quite happy here getting to know these characters, and I did kind of go, oh, okay, I'm with the trudge of the rest of the film with it. But all the other members are great. I do think though, going back to Elena at the beginning, the whole circumstances and sort of what gets the plot moving is very easy and quite contrived. She's in pursuit of this target, and then the target just happens to have a magical briefcase of red pixie space dust that just stops you from being a widow. That was weird to me, and I don't even did it get an explanation at the beginning. It just seemed like it was a MacGuffin that was just there, no explanation. They just have a briefcase of all the different serums to stop them. Like, why didn't you mass produce this? Why did you just make vials for each individual person? Make backups, make spares, in case you drop one, in case one breaks or falls into enemy hands. I get that that's the whole thing, but I just felt it was too easy, especially at the beginning, how it just kind of gets sprayed in her face and she's just suddenly good. I'd have liked to have seen her be an agent, be, that opposite side to Natasha, and through the power of love and family, she defects that way and she sees sense, rather than just like magical red space dust that kind of stops them. It was almost like kryptonite, wasn't it, from BVS, where Batman sprays it in Superman's face and suddenly he's changed. And that goes towards the ending as well. You have this room full of agents, the best, most capable agents in the entire world that sent out on all these missions, and they're just spray this in their face and they're fine. They're fine. It just, I don't know, it felt really lazy to me. I can't quite put my finger on it. I think just as a device, yeah.
I was going to say, with kind of what you've just said there, with kind of the family and love thing, you could have had a very nice mirror image shot from the Winter Soldier of Bucky standing over Steve,
something like that,
kind of having it as like she can't kill her own family.
And if you prove that Elena can defect through the power of love, then make Taskmaster do the same thing at the end. Like, it can be done. There is hope for people who have been in this lifestyle. I don't know. There's something there with it, but
it's a revenge film, which actually isn't driven by revenge. It's driven by a magical formula that stops you from wanting revenge.
Yeah. And I guess just like another thing I'll just throw in there, and this is kind of like the Marvel humor thing for me, which I had a problem with. That you have this like really just like harrowing pre-credit sequence of this father, this surrogate father, essentially lying to these children and forcing them into this lifestyle that they didn't choose, this child soldier thing, which you see glimpses of, which would be horrible, which happens in the world, which is absolutely fucking diabolical. And then when they meet up with him again, it's all played for laughs. Like, there's a joke in the film about forced sterilization, and they make a joke about being forced to have a hysterectomy, and it's all played for laughs. I'm like, there's so much bad blood between like David Harbour's character and these two women, and it's just, I don't feel like they react in the believable way that you would in that situation. If you loved this person as a father and then they betrayed you and forced you into this lifestyle for your entire life against your will, you wouldn't have that kind of sort of passive aggressive attitude. You'd want to murder this person. You'd want to go in, it just felt like the Marvel thing to me, where they have the moment where they could have like a really serious, dramatic, emotional sequence, but it's like, oh no, we've got to punctuate it with a joke and bring it back to the funnies. And I don't know, I felt that was kind of out of place in this film a little bit.
I want to jump back to the res stuff. I don't know if I've like caught something nasty, but she's like got mind control. Like they physically can't, like so when Natasha defected, they say in the film, after they just went for mind control on everyone. That's what the pigs experiment was.
That's fine on like the iPad thing, yeah, but like the whole kind of Suicide Squad thing, we've got like a bomb implanted in you, or tracker or whatever.
Yeah,
but just like the red gas that you just spray in the face, and they're fine, they're good, all is forgiven kind of thing. Like,
but it's like the punch thing, though, isn't it? That you can't punch them because of the nerve thing.
You just have to break your own nose. That sever the. I've got a problem with that as well. She's like sever the nerve.
We'll get to that, but I feel as if you guys have missed something. Sorry, that sounds a bit harsh, but
yeah,
it's like clear as daylight what they're talking about. It was all after Natasha defected. The whole goal was that no one else can defect again, and Melina's the one that created it, which is why she turned, because she didn't know that they'd done it on Florence, Pugh, and all the new ones, and it only came in after Natasha defected. So no power of love could have worked, because it was like scientifically.
I think what Chris was trying to say was it would have been a better plot point instead of having the magic pixie dust,
which happens from her opening scene, like just right from the off. She's good.
Oh,
I want to see that transition, and progression of the character to change that mindset.
But I just don't think that could have worked though, because he would have just killed her. Because when they kill I will say one of the dark scenes when they kill that other one, when that he makes her like taser her face off. I don't know. I just thought that was a bit of a weird one. But the Florence, I didn't mind Florence Pugh, and I forgot the other bit that came after. Sorry. What was said after the red stuff?
I just mentioned about like the comedy elements that were thrown in,
I have
the drama moments.
One comedy element which I absolutely hated, because there was dead silence in the cinema, and it's the scene where you've got David Harbour. He gets shot with the sleeping dart, and he says, "Is that all you've got?" And then a comical amount of sleeping darts hits him.
It's like Ace Ventura. It was like When Nature Calls.
It was like watching a cartoon. It was just. I liked that his character was played for the humor in the way that it was. I like the fact that it was the only way that he could get around it, because he is quite a sorrowful character, and he plays a lot of things off for jokes and stuff like that, just so that he doesn't have to face up to the fact that he is a failure. I like that element, but then having other people apply that level of failure onto him with that kind of level of humor, I didn't like it.
I think that's what you've got David Harbour in for, though. He's kind of in Pedro Pascal territory now, where they're like the two dads of cinema at the moment. You've got Pedro in The Mandalorian, technically Wonder Woman. Last of Us is filming now. The one he did of Rodriguez at Christmas when he's the dad superhero. You've got David Harbour in Stranger Things. He's the go-to guy now to be the weird sort of father that's not really a father type thing. But I didn't mind the comedy stuff of him. I didn't mind that joke. I mean, I did want to see more of him in action. That's one gripe I'll say, is that the way they bigged up, like that opening scene when he just randomly launches the metal wagon of all the stuff and across it, and I was like, we know he's the Russian kind of Captain America. We get the amazing Captain America fake war stories where there is that guy who's like Captain America out of the ice in 2010, not the 80s, and he goes full what's his name? Gilda Lockhart on him, like he's got like no like movable arm after.
Yeah, it was horrible.
And I think David Harbour for me stole. Well, I think Florence Pugh's the best thing in this film, but any moment David Harbour is in, he's stealing that scene. It doesn't matter what he's doing, why he's doing it. Even the things as sort of minis, like when he thinks he's talking in the earpiece, there's just something about him that's just so like when he's not a nice guy, and he wanted to get back in the game. He didn't want to be a spy doing that for 3 years. He just wanted to go out and fight, and somewhere, he's got an action figure of himself. He already knew he had his own like sound like he starts like humming it before that he clicks the button. So there's a Red Guardian story out there to be told one day, who knows? But I loved all of his stuff with it. But sort of jumping back in, I mean, it's not really my place to say, but I thought it was quite funny there. Is it your time of the month? Not that. It's because it's such a boring trope that so many films say. It's about time, like someone else was like, this is a shit joke. Can we stop putting it in films, please? And that was a really smart way to like make him uncomfortable. So I'm glad they just got out of the way because we didn't get any other weird jokes like that. But I thought that was more of a commentary at like the sort of typical Marvel jokes that don't work. I thought it was quite working against it, which worked really well. But then that's just me.
See, I
agree with that. Yeah. No, I was just going to say I'll agree with that. Yeah.
I think David Harbour was easily the best thing in this film. Easily. He looked like he was having the most fun. I loved his character, his physicality as well, to get into that kind of shape for the character, I thought was quite good as well. I liked him when he was more of a fallible character, though, where he is very patriotic and sort of, chanting all this jargon like they promised me ideologies and, pounding his fist, and he's living in the glory days. The bit where he like crams into his outfit trying to, be the Red Guardian, was it? Not the Crimson Dynamo. I did like that joke in the film. And I did want to see more of his character. I'd love to see the character in his heyday, if they do a separate series or something like that in some way. I'd love to see more of his character, but some of the comedy elements with him towards the end it kind of felt like they had a trope and they just stuck to it throughout the whole movie. So, you had the earpiece stuff, and they repeat that joke about 2 or 3 times where he's trying to have like an emotional goodbye to someone and they're not listening or they're not there. And I'm like, that's fine to do it once, but they kind of pounded that into the ground a little bit for me. Also, the Gulag escape as well as an action scene, I didn't think it was good. I think that kind of goes to Natasha as well, that I get that they're heightened characters, but you don't mean to tell me that with one arm holding onto a rope of a helicopter, she could pick up and lift David Harbour, who is a hefty guy in real life anyway. He's a big guy, even bigger in this, and a super soldier. Like, I get it, but nah. Not in a million years.
The prison escape was better in Deadpool 2. I'll put it.
Yeah, it kind of was.
This goes back to my problem as well, is that they take something that doesn't need to be a massive bombastic scene, a prison breakout. That can work, you know. I mean, Chris, I know you're not seeing Cruella, but there's a prison breakout scene in that.
Yeah.
And it's like 5 prison cells, and it's done in the streets of London. And it's not, you know, they don't have an avalanche on London to up the stakes for. And that's what I just don't get with this film, is that so much, the concept of it's grounded. It's a personal story, and they're just going for, okay, you know, we're going to make it the Gulag, but we're going to make it there be an avalanche. You don't need an avalanche. Just have yourself blow up the tower and scoop down the helicopter to pick them up and go. It just felt like unnecessary, over the top. And also it was, and it was like bad CGI at that as well. And this is it. So I'm going to swap at the screeners, because I was, you know, we don't really discuss stuff, but Chris, you've done Disney screeners. They slap your name in the middle of the screen. Whole film templated, your name and the date. So I've watched the entire film, my name on it, and it was like a compressed file that it was in HD, like the characters were, but none of the CGI was. And I don't know if it was some kind of like unfinished cut or something like that, but the CGI looked awful. And that's why in that video, I said, I don't know if it's genuinely terrible CGI or if it's a bit of a naff screener and it's not as bad. Now, I'll say that I don't think the film is up to standards of some of the other Marvel films on modern day CGI. I'll say that right away, watching it yesterday. It's a hell of a lot better than what to sit through. I would love to be able to make someone sit through that. And I messaged Neil, who was on Get Your Comic Con. We were chatting about it the other day. I said, mate, I was like, this is really weird, but was your video quality shit as well? He's like, yes. And then he messaged me the same thing yesterday. Just came out the cinema. CGI's not great, but looked a million times better. And I just wanted to get that out of my system, because that was my big problem the other day, was I didn't know how to go in on the CGI, because I couldn't tell if it was what we were sent or what the film is. And I'm going to use this to once again pipe up the return of cinemas. Even though this isn't the best film, and still go see it at cinema, don't pay the Disney Plus money to watch it at home. It's still a better cinema experience. And it's also cheaper unless you're a family. I understand why the families do Disney Premier Plus thing, but it's just one of them where, wow, exactly. And I do want to say that I don't think this is going to hit the number they're saying. They think this is going to get 100 million opening weekend in America, which will be the first one. I know Fast 9 got 70. I can't see it hitting 100 mil just because of the Disney Premier for people at home. Yeah. Maybe 85, 90. I can't see 100. I'm happy to be proven wrong on Saturday. I still think it's going to make a lot of money worldwide. But with the Premier Access thing, that does cancel out numbers regardless. So I can't see it hitting $100 million the opening weekend box office. But that's going to be an interesting topic for the next probably few months of the big films we get. I think we'll certainly the money for highest grossing film. This is really off topic now. The highest grossing film of 2021 is by country mile is going to be Spider-Man in December. I'm betting all my money on that in December time, unless Boris.
And it will do it within December as well. Like,
oh no, I don't know about in December still, but it could. If anything, listen, if there's a poster that's got Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, and Tom Holland on, then the money's in. But you know, there's a lot of films come out in December. The Matrix has come out like 4 days after it. So,
good point.
I mean, if I was doing that poster, I'd just be like, let's get Tom Holland out of there. Because, I mean, Alfred Molina's in this movie, so bring him on the poster. And, like, let's take Andrew Garfield off the poster. And Norman Osborn's meant to be in it, right? So let's put him on the poster. And Toby... Perfect. There we go. There's your poster. And just squint and pretend you're watching Spider-Man 4.
If we are going into kind of our final thoughts and stuff like that,
are we?
Are we not? Or
no, we got like the whole ending.
No. I ended up just diverting off point.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Should we go into the comments then that have come through?
Yeah, let's do the comments right there.
So,
Bavari.
This one. It would have strengthened the Black Widow character if her example was the reason that her sister affected, but unfortunately they chose an easier plot point. I completely agree with that. And every movie with action or CGI scenes is always better in cinema, in my opinion, and that is also another thing that is completely correct. One of the things that I do wish to see in cinema one day would be the Raid films, but I've only ever seen them at home. I feel like they would be amazing cinema experiences. On top of that,
Still
if we
waiting
are
on the
going
Raid
into
3. Still waiting.
please don't don't. We're going to be waiting for a long time.
Should we talk about Rachel Weisz a little bit? Because we kind of talked about the other ones, and I feel like we've shafted Rachel Weisz a little bit. I thought she was fantastic. Like, I love her from like the Mummy days. Like, that's I'm always going to think of Evie from those films. I thought she was great, and I like the fact that her and David Harbour, like, they're not nice people. None of these people are inherently nice people, and I think they could have gone into that more. But I think the scene that kind of cemented that for me was the pig scene, which I think that was the most tense that I was in the whole film. She's like, stop breathing, and this pig, it's like a dog, it's so obedient, it's sitting down, and the scene just carries on, and you're just thinking about that. So it's good sort of like cinema. I think there's like a famous quote that Alfred Hitchcock said about suspense in film. If you show the bomb under the table and then have the scene, you're constantly thinking about the bomb if you reveal it first. And it's this, like, she's talking and talking. I'm there just going like, that pig's not breathing, and it keeps cutting to the pig. That was the most tense I was in the whole film, in this like Marvel action film with really high stakes. I was more concerned about the pig in the film. But yeah, I think she was fun. And then as the film goes on, it kind of does go into sort of more, the comedy aspects. I did want to say I was kind of bothered by a lot of the continuity editing in this film, which I've never had before, and maybe you guys didn't have a problem with it. There's a scene towards the end where she's like walking along a bridge, and then she like she grapple guns up, and like the editing was really sharp, and there was no transition showing her like get to the top and land, and it would just cut, and she was walking down a different corridor. There's a scene where she's like crawling through like a vent, and you see her taking it off, and then it just cuts, and she's like halfway in the vent. Stuff like that really stood out to me. There was also a really bad bit of continuity editing with Florence Pugh and Scarlett Johansson, where I think they're like sharing a beer and they're kind of catching up. I can't remember which city they're in. It might be Budapest, actually, or Budapest. Have we decided how we're pronouncing that word? I'm going to say Budapest.
Pronounce it however you want, I feel.
And it's like the thing in Tenet where it's like they'll be sat like this, and then they'll be sat with a bottle next to the mouth, and then they'll be sat like this. And there were a few moments like that I caught in the film as well, which I haven't really had with some other Marvel films. Just, wanted to throw that out there. But Rachel Weisz, what did we think?
I don't want to sound disappointed. I didn't mind that. I liked how they used her in this, that we know she's playing the mum of the family. I was really against her being the villain, but then it turns out she's not the villain. It was the Mission Impossible mask swap thing, which I didn't mind. That's the kind of thing that Mission Impossible's done the mask thing so many times. A lot of people have turned off it now, but I still quite like getting done like that, and I didn't see it coming. I was like, oh my god, Rachel Weisz is the main villain. Like, it's like that scene from that guy from Fast Line. Like, I'm kind of like scared but aroused at the same time, isn't it? It's really weird, and it's one of them. I was like, is she really going to be the villain? Does that make sense to this film for Rachel Weisz to be the villain?
I'm down.
No, but I want to see her be the villain. But I'm glad she wasn't. But like, it was when she'd got changed and she had like eyeliner, and I was like, oh, this is like the old school Black Widows. Like, they must have a black eyeliner, and they eventually just got rid of that for the next set of them all. But the things about Rachel Weisz, we don't see a lot of things, and it's a shame because I think she's a very good actress. Obviously, she's married to Daniel Craig, and I always thought, don't know why she'd end up in a Bond film one day. Maybe that would have been a bit too on the nose. But this did film at the same studio, same time, though, as James Bond, which is a really interesting thing. I think she did an interview a couple of weeks ago where they were all on a Zoom call. She said it was Kevin Feige, her, Florence Pugh, all of them were talking about release dates, and Kevin Feige wouldn't refer to James Bond. He called it the other big film. Apparently, Daniel Craig came downstairs and like popped it around the corner, and she was too scared to introduce him to them all, because they were talking about the James Bond release date, and she's obviously married to Daniel Craig, for those that don't know. That's a Skype conversation I like to see on YouTube. Just all of them chatting, and Daniel Craig just pops up out of the blue. But
and yet another Bond comparison with this film. There's like I don't know if we've talked about it already, have we? The Moonraker.
No.
Moonraker. Yeah. Perfect time. Let's talk Moonraker. I'm kind of actually gutted that last Tuesday, I think whenever the review embargo lifted, everyone was saying there's a Moonraker reference. And this wasn't even James Bond fans. This was like the media. And obviously, we're doing the Bond retrospective, for those that don't know. And we've done Moonraker the same week. So everything was tying in beautifully. There was a load of Moonraker stuff because of some other drama somewhere. And everything was Moonraker related. And then suddenly it's like, apparently there's a Moonraker reference in Black Widow. It's like, how's Black Widow going to get a Moonraker reference? I was kind of curious with you. Like, what could they do? And then the film starts. It's not just a reference. She's literally watching the film, and she knows it word by word. She is a Roger Moore fan. As far as I'm concerned, that's a bullet. That's a bullet for the Roger Moore on the favorite
Right.
list.
Yeah.
It's what and the thing that's mental with the Moonraker reference. I loved it anyway, but it's kind of it's not the poetry it rhymes thing, but silly space station at the end of the film in orbit, and we got one that looked like it. Man who wants kind of the perfect race of his women. Ray Winston, not Hugo Drax. So I actually thought Moonraker, maybe it was more than just a cheap Bond reference. Maybe I'm reading into it too much on the other end of it. But I mean, if you're going to bring in a Bond reference, why not, right?
Yeah.
Daniel Craig would be way too on the nose. I don't think it would work. But something as silly and incredible as Moonraker is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
No, I agree as well. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a silly space station. I still have no idea how it's kind of afloat, because there was like scaffolding underneath it, and I don't know. But I have a lot of gripes about just the Red Room and the entire Red Room thing. I do like sorry, just going back to the last point, I do like Rachel Weisz in this film, and I do also like the face reveal, especially because Scarlett Johansson had used it in previous films as well, so it wasn't like completely pulled out of nowhere. And I'm pretty sure you can see them up on the wall when she kind of says, I hope you're not going to use any of those, and she puts the gun back and she says, I'm putting the gun away. I think you can kind of see in the background.
You can.
Those things. So it is kind of like, Chekhov's face mask, I guess. But the Red Room, I have so many problems about just the entire sequence and everything. And I think, Chris, you touched on it earlier with the whole severing the nerve and stuff like that. And
so
just
dumb.
Kind of how Ray Winston is kind of defeated in the end and everything like that. The entire sequence up there, it's just too much. For this film, for any Marvel film, it's too much. I think they just went, do you know what? Fuck it, let's just go completely over the top. Especially for a film that is meant to be a kind of homage and a sending off and the passing of the torch and stuff like that. It's just, I'm going to say it again, too much.
Yeah, I was just really let down with the Red Room, to be honest. And I mean, the Red Room's always been this, this term, this place, this organization that's always been very much in the shadows and whispered about in the previous Marvel films, and always had like an element of intrigue to it. It's like, what is the Red Room? What happens in the Red Room? And how do they sort of like essentially give birth to these like master assassins? And there are some good moments where, she's walking down like narrow corridors and you can see like all of them doing like this kata, almost like this in sequence gun thing. It reminded me of like Equilibrium with Christian Bale. Really good stuff. But my problems with it is that it's just completely dismantled so easily from just like a handful of people. And if this is meant to be your elite of the elite, I never got that impression from them at all. It was like the whole problems that I have in Loki at the moment with the TVA, that it's meant to be this maximum security, need to preserve the sacred timeline thing, and they're like stormtroopers. They just get taken out so easily. And I'm like, you've got the widows, like a whole room of widows, not just one. Yeah. One could take out anyone. They're meant to be capable of anything. You've got a whole room full of them, and they land a couple of punches on Scarlett Johansson and then just magical red space dust, and then they're all good guys. I really hated it. I hated the ending. It just didn't have the tension, or I mean, this is a spy thriller for God's sake, and they didn't really do any spying. Like the Gulag stuff was just like a loud action set piece, wasn't subtle in any way. Let's fly this helicopter over a prison and let's not try and sneak in or do any kind of espionage stuff. And your end, like, I'm fine with the Red Room being like a giant helicarrier, I suppose, like whatever. But within that, I didn't sense any kind of tension or drama. And it was like, A to B to C, and the plan just happens without a hitch, really. That was kind of my biggest problem, I think, with it.
It's just needlessly big.
Yeah.
They go into 3 rooms, and it's just, we'll destroy this so that we can get someone's attention. You can get their attention in. I know this is really petty. My biggest gripe is, that's how they stay above the radar. I was like, no, we don't live in the 1940s anymore. In this world, they have A, fucking satellites, and B, helicarriers. They're just going to randomly fly into it one day. Oh, I didn't see it there. It was on our radar. Things like that just really got me. And that's why, again, it's going back to that they're trying to do too much. I really want to bring one thing. I saw something on Twitter in the last 20 minutes, which is actually really cool. Throwback to Avengers here. Apparently, in Loki's speech, when he calls Remulin Quim, so I have to bring up every time we bring up the speech. He says this to her: "Can you take out that much red? Dracov's daughter, Sao Paulo, or the hospital fire?" 3 incidents, and we got one of them. So wouldn't have ever remembered that, because I obviously remember the 2 words out of his speech. But the Dracov's daughter thing is obviously, I don't know if it's something comic book wise, but that's kind of cool. It's made it a little bit better now. But hopefully, Chris, I don't think she's coming back, because then they have to explain both Sao Paulo and a hospital file. So let's hope not. But no, the Red Room, again, it's just that, I know in Age of Ultron it was like castles and like the ballerinas, wasn't it? And, she thought, it was all part of his master plan to fake his death to go to the clouds and all that nonsense. But I just have a real problem with the Red Room. And I think that's my problem, that because the family setup's so good and you care about these individual people, just sending them off to a big exploration part at the end, it just didn't work for me. It lost me. And I think the final act is one of Marvel's weakest fights. And it's what we said, 5 years ago, it feels like a phase. Remember in like phase 2, all the endings were the same. I think in all of them, it wasn't even beams. It was like you had like Hell-carriers collapsing, Guardians had a ship collapsing. There was loads of them that were quite obviously. Thor: The Dark World had the ship collapsing. It was like a proper phase 2 ending as well. And I just think it should have been better in that sense. I don't know, how they settled on it, what the goal was for it, but it just felt really pointless. And I feel as if they were hyping the Red Room up to be that it must be this humongous important thing. It's like, well, it doesn't need to be big. It's important, yes, but the name of it's a room. I always just assumed it was a room in a facility, not the actual name of said facility. But it's just little things like that. We have to make it big, and the CGI was its worst in the final act. It was still that yesterday. What I will add, it's lovely getting IMAX footage back in when they extend the screens out, and I love seeing stuff like that. But you can really notice some of the green screens as well. There's a scene when like Florence Pugh was running, and you can spot that she's on a green screen by a country mile.
With the explosions going off in the background.
It's just, even for modern day or Marvel standards, it just was below par. And this is a film they said they finished a year ago before lockdown that was ready to go. And I'm like, well, do you want to have a quick look back at it? And I'm like, because that CGI went ready. Considering again, and maybe this is the benefit of where we are now. WandaVision didn't have that problem, and Loki hasn't had that problem, and their TV budget. And it just falls back to that, yes, it was made in 2019, but the green screen wasn't. So, I don't know.
Episode 3 of Loki was pretty ropey, I think we said. It's a bit green screen. Yeah. But that's TV, it's not a 200 mil film. Yeah.
But one thing I was going to note in that kind of Red Room sequence where all of the widows are kind of attacking Scarlett Johansson. Weren't they all training with guns beforehand? And now suddenly they're in a room and they're just going to punch her in the stomach a few times instead of actually just popping her once, like in the head.
Each one taking it in turns to punch her and not all swarming on her at the same time.
It should have been each one taking it in turns just to shoot her once in the head,
You just needed one to rock up, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, done. Movie over. Just credits. I did like how Ray Winston gets completely Cutler Beckett at the end, though, where like the flame kind of engulfs him and you have like the really cheesy shot of the glasses like fly.
It's like 3D.
It was. Back in like 2010, if this had come out then, 2012, it probably would have been in 3D, wouldn't it? Let's be honest. But and just like the whole action at the end is just so much, and we saw that in the trailer anyway, so we knew it was coming. I kept thinking like, okay, when's the free fall sequence? And it kept going and going, and as soon as the Red Room's revealed that it's like this giant space station thing, I was like, oh, okay, well that's where it's going to end. And it was basically just Ahsoka Tano at the end of Clone Wars, just like the free falling, dodging rubble, running on shit, and it's too much. It's too much, and it's I don't even just have a problem with Black Widow doing that kind of shit in this film. She was doing shit like that in the first Avengers film, and I had a problem with it. The bit where she jumps on that Chitauri ship, like it's coming at like 300 miles an hour, and she just grabs onto it with one arm. And she's doing all this crazy stuff. I had a problem with that. It's too excessive. It's just there for spectacle, and that plot convenience. They got plot armor on, so there's so much debris, like unimaginable amounts of debris and fire and explosions and wreckage falling, and they still are able to like deploy a parachute and navigate it, and nothing's ripping through the chute, and they're fine, they're untouched, everything's all fine.
Oh, and they all land in the same spot as well.
And it's just when you put characters to that extreme, it's if this was like an Iron Man film and you had like a crazy action thing like that at the end, that's fine, because that's kind of, he is a more heightened character. But when you've got that more sort of low tier Marvel character who is a human and just gets by on their skill to put them in these extreme situations. It's the Fast 9 thing, but as I mentioned, Fast 9's at least self-aware of what it is. This isn't meant to be that, and I think you would have had way more impact if you'd have just reined it back in and just gave it, it might not stand up there as one of the most impressive to look at or over-the-top Marvel films that you come to expect, but I think it would have been more grounded and in keeping with the character, and I think you could have still done something special with that character of Black Widow and not have it be so grandiose. And I think it kind of also takes away, put her in all these like extreme situations. I think that kind of takes away from the impact of her death in Endgame, because you see her surviving all crazy shit in this film, just sort of like falling off that cliff now in Endgame kind of just feels like, oh, okay, so she survived all this and she just goes out like that. It kind of cheapens Endgame a little bit for me as well, I think.
I don't think it cheapens Endgame, but it's a very interesting segue to the credit scene if anyone wants to talk about that quickly.
Yeah.
I don't know why this was one of my favorite credit scenes of all of them. No animation. I know we had the opening title sequence, but it did feel weird for it to cut to like second assistant director or something up first. I was like, I feel as if there was maybe 30 seconds missing there. But I love this credit scene. Just the acknowledgement of beforehand, one of the greatest character arcs I never thought the world would need. The jacket that Black Widow wears in Infinity War was Florence Pugh's all along. Is that the first ever jacket to have a character arc? I don't know.
I didn't even remember the jacket, but I was watching it thinking, did she have that in Infinity?
That's why I was like, I googled it after.
She absolutely did have it.
Yeah, I googled it after, and she's got it, and I was like, you know what, fair play.
That's quite cool.
Because I was like, it's so weird having a conversation about pockets and jackets. I was like, it's gonna come into something surely, but I liked the funeral. No, it's not really funeral; it's a gravestone. But I think we spoke. One of the criticisms of Endgame is like she's dead. Throws chair. And it's like, pause, done. And I think maybe Black Widow's death may be a massive part of Hawkeye now, which makes me actually a lot more excited for the show than I already was. But the fact that we've got, I can't even attempt to try and remember her long name, but I know Julia Dreyfus.
Allegra Desfontaine.
There we go.
Yeah, good luck. And I know that we don't know what the story's going to be. Is she Hydra? Is she this or that? None of us know, but she's putting together a team, as Sam Jackson would often put it. So I'm very curious to see the capacity of what's going to happen. But she's already working for her, which is what I like. So either she's still an assassin or she's just doing work for her. But the whole, this is the guy that's responsible for her death. I was like, oh, that's quite an interesting way to get me to tune in to watch Hawkeye. I mean, I was going to watch it anyway. But at least now I know that Florence Pugh's going to turn up at some point and try and kill him, which should make for some good TV.
Well, this might be a spoiler, but she's listed down as being in every single episode.
Well, she is now. They put it on after yesterday, so they've been quick. Also, when on Google when I finally got Taskmaster character, it now comes up Olga Kurylenko. So it's going to get spoiled for everyone the next day that Googles it. But I think it worked. And again, for people that may be confused, that don't know what's happened, there'll be someone somewhere where they're watching Marvel for the first time, and I'll tell someone, go and watch Black Widow. Probably not after Civil War, maybe one or two after Civil War, bring in something a bit new. But just don't watch the credit scene. And you'd never have known the difference. But the credit scene, I felt like it was moving. Maybe because it's the first film we've had in... I know Endgame didn't have one. I know that obviously in WandaVision they said, we thought about putting the WandaVision scene at the end of it. I'm glad they didn't. And I think this would have been a good one to kickstart the films again, because there's obviously a plan somewhere down the line. We don't know what the plan is, but we know she's got John Walker and Yelena at the moment on her side. I'm sure there'll be many of us. Dark Avenger, it was a really good thing I saw on Twitter tonight. Someone put Phase 1 to 3, the Infinity Saga, Phase 4 -- the Multiverse Saga, and that's got me very excited.
I think that's more than likely. It really did kind of make me laugh in the film, though, where she was like, do you want to know who's responsible for the death of Nat? And then she shows a picture of Hawkeye. I'm like, well, it's technically Thanos. But maybe, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is doing it for her own nefarious purposes, and she's going to turn them on Hawkeye to get him out of the picture for whatever reason. Maybe there's something more behind it. But if she's genuinely spinning the yarn that he was responsible, I'm like, not really, because he tried to sacrifice himself. But we don't know. We don't know until Hawkeye and It is kind of awkward. It's almost like the Ant-Man 2 thing where the film would fit much better before all like the big drama happens, but it's always the end credit scene that would then spoil the future film. So, I mean, if I was suggesting someone to watch all these films, I would say, you know, watch this in between Civil War and, you know, Infinity War, but just skip the end credit scene and just watch that kind of like after as a separate thing. But I like that we see the gravestone and is that definitive end for the character, which we all assumed it would be anyway. It does feel like that kind of farewell type thing for the character, which I appreciate. And, you know, it's setting us up, but it is that comic book thing, isn't it? That, you know, Captain America's out of the picture, the one that we know, but we've got a new Captain America now, and like Black Widow is out of the picture, but we've got a new one now. So, but that's just like a comic book thing. They always go through like different iterations, but it's exciting. I guess I don't know if I'm looking forward to Hawkeye, but it's what we keep saying with these Marvel shows now, that they're, you know, required viewing now to make sense of the MCU. And we've been kind of lucky at the moment with delays and everything with COVID, and that we have just had these staggered releases of the TV shows now. So you can kind of just watch one episode each week and then a little bit of a break and then the next one. I did feel the effects more with this one when it was Loki episode 4 and this in the same day. I did get a little bit of Marvel fatigue that day. And I am worried that once schedules and, you know, especially we've got, did you say 3 other Marvel films this year? 4 other Marvel films, or 4 in total?
3 more.
Coupled with the TV shows, I think that's when I'm going to be on the ropes a little bit with Marvel. But I'm here for it. The story continues as we move into phase 4, but I just hope it can, even if it doesn't hit the heights of the previous ones, it's going to be interesting to see viewer engagement as well over the next few years and the next couple of Marvel films to see if people are still with it, I think.
I don't think they'll be going away. I think they're in. I think they've been very smart. Now they've switched it to Wednesdays for the Disney Plus day. Obviously, we're lucky we got it yesterday in England, right? Because it is out tomorrow in America. A Wednesday, Friday probably works better, so you don't have to watch it twice in the same day. But so remember, series on The Mandalorian, they pulled back episode 7 a day early so that it didn't clash with Rise of Skywalker on the Friday. Obviously, we got it Thursday in England for the film a day early, so obviously we got Mandalorian same. Well, technically we didn't get the Mandalorian the same day, but anyone with a bloody VPN did. It was just one of those where I'm intrigued because we know that Loki is the end of the. I mean, I keep saying the current crop of TV shows. It's kind of like, it's not phase 1, is it? But it's like the first wave was WandaVision, Captain America, and Loki. We've known they're going to be the first 3. We know there's a gap, and then we know we're going to get Hawkeye, Miss Marvel, and She-Hulk. I know What If trailers come out today, and that seems like a sort of middle ground type thing where, you know, it's animation, it's a whole What If concept. I'm intrigued for it. But that's not going to be like your required viewing experience. But I'm
Secret
kind
Wars
of
a film, or is that a TV series?
That's going to be a TV show that's just started filming, which is that's going to be massive, and I think that's going to be some big, not phase ending thing, but Secret Wars is a massive deal in the comics. I'd imagine for the show,
in the comics,
I think that'll be some big end of, because if you looked at that Disney slate from last year, Secret Wars was one of the last things they were talking about TV wise. So I know there's going to be a very brief pause in between, but I think once the multiverse has been opened, either next week or in December, I think things may start to take shape of where it's all going to head towards. But again, even knowing that all of this stuff's happening, this film just stands out for the wrong reasons again, because it's not even set in this now new saga. This is technically an Infinite Saga film. I don't care that it's in Phase 4. This is set between, you know, Civil War and Infinity War, and I think time. It sounds horrible. Not that time's not going to benefit this, but I'm very much just saying this is like the Florence Pugh origin film, and I don't mind that. I can stick with that, but I'd like us to get more of these characters come back down. I reckon we would. I reckon Florence Pugh as an actress is big enough to get her own show or film at some point, and they could easily bring them back, do stuff with her. But obviously she's like 24, 25. I can't remember if she got nominated for an Oscar, but she's leading stuff already. She's a massive deal, and I think Marvel to sign her up is going to be a really big thing for them as the years go by. Yeah,
she's 25 and has been nominated for Little Woman. I definitely see it. Don't want to use the word Avengers Origins Black Widow, because that would bring back memories of.
No, please don't.
But I definitely see her in the future taking up the mantle of the Black Widow, and having that kind of play into it and stuff like that. I'm intrigued to see where the MCU goes from here, because this has opened a door, but not too wide. It's not kind of going to affect the entire MCU in a massive kind of thing. All it's going to do is just give us a bit of backstory on a character we knew and introduce us to a new character, possibly going forwards. I really do hope they do a Red Guardian series, because that would be fantastic, as well, to go along with that. Or even do a series which is just based around the family without Natasha, because I feel like they all bring something to the table and they could all have something to play in the future, especially with various different team-ups possibly happening and just the unknown kind of eventuality of the MCU going forwards. But if we are kind of wrapping this up now, then I would say, yeah, go and watch this film. It's not the best Marvel film, you should, but you're a Marvel completionist at this point. Like, you've watched all the other films, so you're of course going to go watch this film. If you are, go watch it in cinema. Don't watch it on Disney Plus or anything like that, purely for just the cinematic experience that goes along with it. I'm sure a lot of people will want to get back to the cinemas and have any excuse possible going to get there. So this is probably the best jump on point if that's the case.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the case with a lot of films at the moment. You know, like, people are just grateful to be heading back to the cinema and sort of seeing anything. And I don't know if that's why people are being more charitable with their reviews on this film. Or, you know, if you love this film, we'll, you know, hand over to people to comment in just a second. But I don't think you'd lose much if you did watch it at home. Obviously, don't watch a screener with like really shoddy CGI. Like, watch it in like the best quality that you can. Like, obviously, which Disney Plus is boasting at the moment, but I don't think there's much visually. If you've got the option, see it in the cinema, definitely. But I think that if you did wait till this was released or just watch it at home, I think you'd be fine with that, in all honesty. This isn't like your big Infinity War or Endgame type situation where it's absolutely required viewing that you see it in the cinema and see it multiple times in the cinema. I think this is just going to be one of those sort of like big action blockbusters, because cinemas are open back up, that people will want to check out. I don't think it's, you know, massively required viewing, but if you've watched all the other Marvel films, give it a go. But I think inherently the problem that I have with this film is that I don't particularly gravitate towards many of the characters. I don't think it's particularly well written or directed in any kind of way, but it does just feel like an apology piece. Like, oh, sorry, it's taken us 10 years to get this film together. And it does, you do get that sense that it's a little too late. As I mentioned at the beginning, it would have been interesting to see how this film would have gone over had it have been released earlier in the MCU, before we had all like essentially like the big finale to it. As it is, it's just fine, but it feels more of a step back, especially heading into phase 4 with the likes of the stuff that we've had set up in the TV shows, which does feel like it's propelling it in a new direction and continuing the story. This just felt more of like, had this been in place of Spider-Man and being like the epilogue to the MCU, would have still felt a bit weird after Endgame, but I think that would have been a more efficient epilogue than Far From Home was, personally. Yeah, it's fun. This is like the bottom end of average for me. It's certainly not one of the best MCU films, and I'd rank it sort of very middle of the road. It didn't really do anything new for me.
Yeah, and I kind of feel that it's too late, and it's like average. It's not. I don't think it's like dross, like some of the ones they've done, your Iron Man 2s and, you know, Thor: The Dark Worlds. I don't think it's like unwatchable by any means, but it's certainly. Oh, I'm thinking about a Marvel film. What am I in the mood for now? Unless you've been watching Strange Things or Florence Pugh films or The Mummy, you're not going to be inclined to jump and stick this one on straight away. So I think this is going to be one where, you know, I've got like a list on my letterbox of where I do it, and I think it's about 14, 15 out of, I include the TV shows, out of 25, which sound, you know, it's like, it's just average, isn't it? It's never going to hit the top 10, and it's just going to be in this lull of a mid-table with a couple of other ones, and I think that's where it's settling for me. So, you know, it is one of them. And what I will add, you know, I know we've had the TV shows. It's nice to hear the Marvel theme at the cinema again. You know, there's something about it now where that theme has gone on to become its own entity. But just saying,
you didn't mention the music, but the Avengers theme prize at the end.
Yeah, Lorne Balfe from. Now, I haven't seen the Tomorrow War yet. It came out last week.
Same.
He did the score for that, and a lot of people are talking about the soundtrack on that film. Some people saying it's incredible. Some people saying dog shit. And that film is just basically getting that comparison for everything anyway. Obviously, I always like know Mission Impossible. I only like the Russian stuff. In this one, like, it's very plain. But whenever there's a Russian, there's a kind of like, you kind of want to go full chorus, but you don't have the balls to do it. That's how I feel like the soundtrack. And listen, you know, I'm not massively patriotic, but I've said to anyone I've ever met that there is no better national anthem than the Russian national anthem.
Yeah.
And anytime anyone can put something like that in film, it's always really exciting. And you know, all the Russia stuff was cool, but there wasn't anything else in the soundtrack I cared for. Just the odd little Russian choir bit, and also that trailer that you spoke about as well previously. When they had the chorus Avengers theme in the trailer, that was the best trailer, and that's because half the footage was old films anyway.
Yeah. I think there's one track in particular. I mean, I don't know all the tracks off by heart, but it sounds exactly like Dark Knight. And I'm not gonna sing it. If you listen to it, it's like exactly the same progression. It sounds like the same, just with like a little bit of a Russian choir in the background. Yeah, it's just, you get Lorne Balfen if you can't get Hans Zimmer. He's just Hans Zimmer light, and he's one of his many proteges, and he's just a composer that hasn't found his own unique sound or voice purely because all of his soundtrack sounds exactly like Hans Zimmer. If you want a Hans Zimmer carbon copy, go and check out Mission Impossible Fallout. You wouldn't know. If you didn't know that Hans Zimmer didn't do the score to that, you'd just be watching it thinking that he did.
It's a great score, though. That one is a great score.
It's a good score, but it's very generic in terms of its sound, I think. He hasn't kind of found a voice for himself, which is quite a shame, I think, as a composer. But, you know, he's coming back for Mission Impossible 7, I think, as well, and 8. So, you know, we'll get to those when they come out. But I guess that'll do it for our review. We've just hit like an hour and a half on it, so I think we can round off on it now. But you know, we've had some comments throughout this one, so thank you for tuning in. And now we hand over to you guys. If you've seen Black Widow, let us know what you think about it. Did you love this film? Are you kind of like us, middle of the road, or maybe you really hated this film? Anything in between with this or anything Marvel related, do be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you do love the Marvel stuff, we say it's not going anywhere. It'll probably be taking a break just after next week. But we've got our Loki spoiler discussion. That's going to be next Wednesday at 8 p.m. We're very intrigued to see what's going to happen in that final episode. As we mentioned in our Loki discussion the other day, lots of questions that still need to be answered and stuff that is definitely going to set up for the future of Phase 4. So if you're looking forward to that as much as we are, do tune into that, because we're going to be talking about the whole thing, and after that also where Phase 4 is going to be heading as well. And I guess this is a good review to talk about it, because there is a Bond reference in this film. George, what have we got coming up on the Bond retrospective front?
Yeah, we have Octopussy coming on Tuesday, the 13th of July. I saw this film earlier today. It's been a long time since I've seen it. No Black Widow references in Octopussy, but I think we may be bringing up a Roger Mooreism of some kind. So if you like James Bond, if you like spy films, this is technically a spy film without any spy work happening by the opening scene. Then this is the thing. But much akin to this, there is a pre-credit sequence, a very good pre-credit sequence with a good credit scene, and you know the rest of it's a downhill experience. So a better version of For Your Eyes Only, Black Widow. There's my fun overall. Who knows? A lot of For Your Eyes Only fans. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them. But yes, the Bond retrospective continues every Tuesday. We're almost at the end of Roger Moore, bless him. Soon we'll be on to bigger and better things. After Timothy Dalton, his name is Piers Brosnan. Thank you very much.
I guess, just a quick blast of the socials. You know, follow us, because we bring other videos out as well. We might also have a special video coming this Saturday evening as well. There'll be more details and times for that as well. So to find all those, go onto our socials: Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. To find a list of all the stuff that we review and continue to review, that's letterboxd.com/Cinema Savvy. And if you'd like to pick up any merch, go to our TeePublic link in the description down below. That'll do it for us. Thank you for everyone who tuned in and commented along, and we'll see you on the next video. Take care, everyone.